Hey guys, welcome to the UV unwrapping and texture creation part of my tutorial. Today I'm going to show you how to set up this great helmet to be textured, and I'm going to show you how to actually put the textures on it after you're done with that. Now, the process we need to go through before we can put this into Substance Painter is called UV unwrapping. And thankfully this object is pretty simple, so we'll be able to get through it in a breeze. Go ahead and highlight your object. Go up here in the top part of your Blender interface and find the tab titled UV Editing. Click that and you'll find your screen is divided into two areas. We have the great helmet on our right and we have our UV unwrap on the left. Now, a UV unwrap, it's a little bit difficult to explain, but I think once you fiddle around with it, it'll come quite naturally. But basically, this island over here tells the game or the 3D rendering engine where to place textures on the 3D object on our left. And right now, this is just kind of a default mess, but that's okay. You didn't do anything to cause it to be that way. It's just something that sort of happens when you're modeling. In order to get started and fix this mess, we're going to need to add something known as seam lines. Now, if you go up in the top left corner in this window up here, we're going to pick the edge selection. And what we need to do is we need to start drawing lines that will show where the new UV islands are going to start. If you don't really understand what I mean, don't worry about it. Just do as I say and follow my instructions. You'll eventually your brain's just going to kind of realize, oh, that's how that works. And it's really just one of those things. Kind of like riding a bike. So I'm just holding shift as I click each of these lines, and I'm going to go kind of draw a perimeter around the edge of the cross. And once I've selected everything here, I'm going to press Control E and I'm going to press Mark Seam. And this is kind of bad, so I think we need to fix this while we're at it. Go ahead and click this, hold shift, click this, hold shift, click this. Press the G key to move, and press the X key to move it back. And this will happen a lot in 3D modeling, by the way. You'll just be kind of doing what you think you should, and then the next day you'll wake up and realize that you forgot a detail. That's fine. It's always good to work on a model as much as you like on a given day, but then sleep on it, because the next day your subconscious, after a day's rest, or a night's rest, is gonna realize all the little things you didn't quite get right. I'm gonna actually slide this back a little bit. I'm gonna press G, gonna press X, move it right to about here. That's much better. Still want it to be a bit more. Almost want it straight on. There we go. I'm actually going to swap to vertice mode, grab this, press G, press X, and move it that way. Yeah, just move it right there. And the same for here, G, X, move it that way. Easy. Okay, so this red line tells us where a new UV unwrap is going to be. And we can actually see what that's going to look like immediately if we come up here and select faces. And we come over here to our cross visor or cross brace. I don't know what it's called exactly. Cross guard? No, not cross guard. And if we press the L key, it selected the entire UV map. And here you can kind of already see, look, this is going to be the, if we wanted to paint it red, because you know how, like in the vanilla Mountain Blade Warband helmet, which I believe I have right here, this color is red. Now this is going to be really easy to separate it. And let's say if we had a texture, if we painted the bottom left corner red here and we move the UV map down here, it would make this entire cross red. We want to do something a bit more sophisticated than that. So let's also come to the top part right here, go back to edge select, click here, hold shift, click here, and actually we're just going to select the entire top ring where it marks the beginning of the ridge. So hold Alt, click between these two lines, boom, it'll wrap all the way around. Hold Control, press E, and choose Mark Seam. There we go. And then we're going to do the same thing for the bottom down here. Hold Alt, click between these lines. We selected this entire ridge, if you will. Hold Control, press E, Mark Seam, boom. Now that's marked as well. And we're almost ready to actually unwrap this thing. So far, we've only been marking seams. We haven't actually unwrapped the object yet. So to quickly unwrap everything, a really easy way to do it is to just press the A key and then press U and select the first option, unwrap. And this is a pretty okay unwrap, but I don't really like what they did to our cross visor here, because we can see one face is up here, one face is down here, and they just make a really advertent angle. You know, this should be more straight like this. And you may notice that you can manipulate the UV maps on the left-hand side of the screen with almost the same controls that you would everything else in Blender. So I'm just going to undo everything we did here because I don't like that. Actually, we shouldn't even have this thing mirrored anymore. So we can go to the mirror modifier, come down to this button, you know, make sure you find the wrench, find the mirror modifier, find this arrow, and click apply. And now when we go into edit mode, we can see the object isn't mirrored anymore. We have access to all the faces everywhere. Anyways, if we press the A key to select everything, and then I press the U key to unwrap, that really is not looking bad. We have, again, you can press the L key. Remember how earlier we pressed the L key to select just the cross section? Well, look, there's the whole cross section, and it's going to look kind of like this in comparison. It's just that these faces get more exposed up here, and these faces get more exposed here on the map. The base of the helmet, the main section, we end up with something like this, and some things could be better, but that chin is really going to come down. It's hard to explain what I'm seeing, though, to a beginner and why it's good or bad. But overall, this is a pretty acceptable map, especially for your first project. I just want to kind of look up here for a moment, and I think that's actually pretty good. The one thing, though, that is a little bit worrisome is the eyes, because it's going to be really difficult to make the inside of the eyes completely black. So I'm going to teach you one little trick, and you can derive a lot of skills from that just for UV unwrapping in general, your own stuff. So go ahead and select the faces that make up all the dark spots in your eyes of your helmet. Just hold shift, click these. And then I'm going to click and drag this. I'm going to press the R key. I'm going to rotate it, move it over here, and so that they're roughly the same. Kind of overlap them, click and drag over all of them, move them outside of the map. And I'm going to press A to select the whole helmet. And now these eye slots, the textures are not going to blend so easily in Substance Painter where it meets the red crossguard. This is going to be red, and this is going to be black. So let's take our unique UV map and let's move it somewhere like right here. And honestly, you should be good to go. You are now ready to put this into Substance Painter. So to do that, you can go back to Layout if you wish, click on the helmet, click File, Export. Actually, let's do this really quick. Just click the helmet, press R, press X, press 90, and then press the minus key. It'll just be a little bit easier to texture this if it's upright. Now we can go to File, Export, wavefont.obj. You can name it whatever you want. I chose Warband Great Helmet Tutorial 2 because this is the second time I've tried to make my tutorials recordings. And limit to selection only. You're going to have to check mark this. It's not by default. That way you're only exporting the great helmet that you made, not everything else in the 3D space. That's really important. So export.obj. Then we're going to open up Substance Painter. It's going to take a little bit to start up. And the first time you open up Substance Painter, well, I'll get the model in first. File, we're going to go to New. PBR Specular Glossiness. There are a lot of different presets that you have available, but the one that you want to use for Mountain Blade Warband is PBR Specular Glossiness, Starter Assets. The document resolution, this determines how big the texture is going to be. Honestly, 512 is fine. 1024 if you want it to look good. I guess so that you can feel a bit better about yourself. We can make something that looks really, really high quality. It won't matter so much in the Warband engine, to be honest, because you have so many soldiers on the field at the same time. I mean, it's not Skyrim where you have like 10 NPCs around at once. You have hundreds, so you don't have to make textures that high resolution. But because we kind of want to feel like we made something cool, I guess we'll make it 1024. The normal map format should always be OpenGL for Mount Blade Warband, unless I got that backwards. Don't worry, if I did get it backwards, we can fix that really easily later. Let me just come up here to select, and we're going to choose the helmet we exported. Again, I always use downloads as my folder. Warband Great Helmet Tutorial 2. And there's this hit OK. Now, when you bring your helmet in, there might be a few issues, like the top part here. Well, I did kind of mess that up. The shading could be a lot better on the top part. There's actually a way to fix your model after you've started your project in Substance Painter. First of all, make the changes that you want to make. In this case, actually, I just want to triangulate the entire object. That way the UV unwraps are the same within Warband, Blender, and Substance Painter. Because every program will automatically apply its own triangulation if you don't do it. So you pretty much always want to do this before you go into Substance Painter. Just right-click, or select the object, tab into edit mode, right-click, triangulate faces, and then let's see if if exporting it like normal fixes the problem. And then we come up here into File. No, actually go to Edit, Project Configuration, select, and select the same file. Click OK. Still not perfect. I'm going to undo what I did here in Blender. I'm actually going to take these two faces and I'm going to right click and I'm going to shade them flat. And since it is the top of the helmet, it should look just fine. Now I'm going to select the whole helmet with A, right click, triangulate faces. Now I'm going to export it. Well, actually, hold on. I'm actually going to grab these two faces, and I think, see, if I shade flat, what will happen to them? That might work. Okay, so if we just make sure these both are shaded flat, well, I don't really want that either. That's going to kind of look bad. I mean, it's not too big a deal, to be honest, but... So here's another trick you can do if you're having shading issues like I am. You can click this face, shade smooth, and then press Y. And what Y does is it separates the faces so that they kind of float. Kind of a nice trick. No one's really going to see the bottom side of this helmet, so it doesn't matter too much. So anyways, make sure these are shaded flat, and make sure these faces are floating. You select them both and press the Y key. And we're good to export this one more time. File, Export, Wave Font, Edit, Project Configuration, Select, Great Helmet Tutorial 2, and away we go. Now the bottom, that doesn't look quite right either. What's going on here? Okay, let's try triangulate faces. Okay, so that's kind of the problem. All right. I guess we're just gonna have to just go ahead and make that flat for now. It's a sin we'll have to deal with later. And no, let's try this actually. Select this, delete those faces. Now, grab this whole ring by holding Alt and clicking between two lines. Press F to fill. Go to Faces. And let's try triangulating them. Okay, that actually worked really well. So yeah, just one more time to make sure you got it. Hold Alt, click between these faces, or I mean these lines. Press F to fill. Go to Faces. Face selection up here. Right click, triangulate. And while they're still selected, I would say press the Y key so that they float. And now File, Export, .obj, Selection Only. Go back in here, again, Edit, Project Configuration, find the object, okay. And, you know, it could look better, but again, it's the backside. And in the end, even the smallest things that you can't quite make perfect will get covered up. And that was actually a good part of the tutorial for you, because you're going to end up doing that a lot when you put an object in the Substance Painter. You put it in Substance Painter, you think, yep, I'm ready to go, rock and roll, and it turns out you missed a detail or something's not quite working with the UV unwraps. So get ready to deal with that a lot. But for now, it looks like we're ready to get cruising. So Substance Painter, you've noticed that I've been moving around a lot. Before you really get started with it, you're gonna need to make the controls more similar to Blender. Just come up here into Edit, into Settings. You're gonna find Shortcuts, and somewhere in here, I'm not exactly sure where, you'll find a series of controls that make the mouse move. Like Camera Rotate, I have that to middle mouse. Camera Snap Rotate, Alt Shift Left. Camera Translate, Shift Middle. If you make these the same as mine, you'll find the controls are fairly similar to Blender. And now here's the really important thing. Back in Blender, if you, in Preferences, Input, if you plan to use Substance Painter and Blender a lot, like both, scrolling does the reverse effect that it does in Substance Painter as opposed to Blender. So you're going to want to go in the controls and set one of the two tools so that scrolling is changed. You don't want to be scrolling in to zoom in Blender and then scrolling in to zoom out in Substance Painter. That's just going to confuse you and slow you down. I'm not 100% sure where the input is located that we're looking for. Key map maybe, 3D view. It's somewhere in Edit, somewhere in Preferences, I'm pretty sure. Input, maybe not. But either way, it's not a big deal. Ultimately, you can also customize the tools for the way that seems fit. If I find the exact way to get the controls to be the same, I'll link it later. But for now, I kind of just need to get this tutorial rolling, and it's not a super big deal. So let's go back to Substance Painter. Again, you can just go to Settings, come down here to where it shows the camera controls, Camera Rotate, Camera Snap Rotate, Camera Translate. Just make sure all this is the same as what I have set here. You can click the pen, you can click the button that you want to activate it, and that'll make it mostly the same. Now, in order to use Substance Painter, we're going to need to make some of our own materials that are applicable to Bannerlord. Now, you might find some of these default materials and think, oh, these look so cool, like steel rough. Yeah, let's make a steel helmet. Drag and drop that in there, like, whoa, that looks like real metal. But in actuality, if we put this in Warband, it would look like shit. You can't use modern physical-based rendering materials in an old engine like Warband. It just won't look the right way. So go ahead and delete that. So what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to come over to Texture Set Settings, and you're going to have to turn off one of the channels, Glossiness. Glossiness does not work in Warband, so we just need to completely remove that. Warband only uses 3 channels. It uses a diffuse or color map, a specular, or a height. And we can even go back to our Great Helmet in OpenBRF and get a reference for the Great Helmet's materials in OpenBRF. So go ahead and go back to OpenBRF, find the Great Helmet. It's in Helmets F in your Common Res folder. You can go back to my previous video if you need to find it specifically again. And if we go to the material, just yeah, the Great Helmet New, we click on the material, it'll take us immediately to the material that the Great Helmet is using. We can see the 3 textures it's using. We see the color map, see the bump map, which makes the object look more 3D, and we see the specular map. And the specular map isn't all too different than the color map. So with that in mind, why do we have 4 textures that we're going to use for Warband? Well, on export, what we can do is we can combine the height map with the normal map to get this purple map that creates all the 3D space and bumps. Pretty nifty, eh? Anyways. So back to Substance Painter. You're going to need to create your own material. And again, like Blender, the tool may overwhelm you at first because there's lots going on, but you really only need to know what 5% of the tool does and you'll be fine. So come over here in the top left, and you might have to rearrange your windows. I believe that when you start out with Substance Painter, your window is going to be down here, for example. Well, you can just click this and move it over here to the top right. And I like that personally because it just gives me a better view of the helmet, in my opinion. Some of your stuff like the texture set settings may not quite be where they're supposed to. You can move all this around. You can drag it out, make it separate. It's a very easy customizable tool. I like to do it like this for the most part. Just kind of slide it down here. So I always see my layers. My texture set settings are not super important, or are not super important. Texture set list and texture set settings. You know, I toy with this once and then I don't need it, and then I have one texture set that's available at a time. But anyways, you don't need to worry about that too much. The main thing is, if you got through all my babbling up to this point in the video, is we want to put a nice metal texture on this great helmet. And where do we get started? I've already told you, you know, we can't do this or that's not going to work. So what do we do? Well, we need to make our own material. And that might sound a little bit daunting, but it's not as difficult as you would think. And the key really in Substance Painter to get the most out of the project is to look at the default materials that we start with and combining them together to get our own. And we use all sorts of masks, kind of like Photoshop actually, which I believe is some of the programming that this tool uses. It's basically Photoshop built into a 3D viewer of sorts if you want to get down into what it really is. And maybe you have Photoshop experience from other projects you've done that will give you a great idea of what needs to be done here. But for now, you have different types of materials. You have normal materials and you have smart materials. And actually, smart materials are where we're going to get a better basis for our own metal material. So go ahead and click this one right here. It'll take a moment to load. And I have created several prefab materials for me to use with all of my projects. But what I want you to do is to come almost all the way down and find the steel rust surface. Now just click it and drag it over here into the layers, and the first thing it's going to do is it's going to be a big meh. It's going to be underwhelming, and you're going to ask, why does it look like a dirty cloud or some sort of marble? What is up with that? That doesn't look like the way a great helmet's supposed to be. And that's because we need to turn off some of the layers. Now, some of the layers in here are kind of useless. The edges one in particular, this has to do with 3D baking. We don't need 3D baking. Just go ahead and delete that. Metal scratches, that is important, but it comes in later. Base metal, it comes in later. For now, rust. We do want rust on our helmet, but we don't want that much rust. So also this mask editor is just going to get in the way. So go ahead, click that mask editor, click delete. And there we go. Now we're starting to see some of the shininess and the metalness come through. It looks pretty okay. And it won't look exactly like this in Warband, even if we exported it the way it is. But we can get it to kind of look like that. So come on down to the base metal. Let's click that. And when you click on the base metal, you can right click in the 3D space to bring up some options. Diffuse is the color of the base metal. We don't want our metal to be black, we want it to be kind of gray, so let's slide it up right to about here. The specular is the shininess and the metallicness of, well, the metal. We don't want specular to be super, super bright for our base layer though, so let's turn it fairly low down. Let's come up to the metal scratches. If we click this plane right here, right click again, our diffuse is still way too dark for the metal scratches. We want the metal scratches to be lighter than the base metal color. And you can click on both to check really quick. We have the base metal. You know, this is right about here, and this is right about here. So yeah, that's a lot better. And now we're going to compare the specular channels to both. Click on base metal. Specular, we want to be fairly dark for the base metal. And then for the metal scratches, we want it to be much lighter. I'd say about 0.4. That's good. And now to make the scratches a little bit more convincing, we're going to tone down the scale. Just click on the mask here on the right. Click on grunge scratches, right click, and have a bunch of options. Just scroll down to, where is it? Scale. And we're just gonna up the scale. And now, if we come, 0.82 is really not bad. Now the texture doesn't look super small, and it doesn't look like it's repeating itself all over, and already this great helmet looks pretty good. But it's not good enough. We need to add a little bit of rust to make it look more convincing. So go ahead and click on our third layer, which is titled Rust. Click on the mask. Now with all of these layers, you always have two things to select. You have the base material on the right, the left. The base material on the left displays usually some sort of blank color or some sort of texture. And on the right-hand side is a mask. Now, the black mask, which we have on the right, because it's a completely black mask, nothing is showing. If we were to replace that with a white mask, which I'll do here really quick, rust is showing everywhere. Now, we don't want no rust, and we don't want rust everywhere. So what we need to do is create a careful balance, and that's where the brushes come in. We're actually going to go back to a black mask. Go ahead and right-click this, add black mask. Come over here to where we have all our different tools and click the brush. And from the brushes, type in dirt. Choose dirt 1. Now, when you click that, we can come back to the 3D space and we can start painting dirt. Now, it's going to be a little bit hard to see when you start painting, well, dirt. And you're going to ask, well, how do I make the lighting follow me so I actually can paint what I want? Well, the way I've set it up in my controls, again, refer to earlier in the video, I'm just going to edit, settings, come down here. I have it so that if I hold down Shift and right click, I can move the light source so I can follow me around while I'm placing the dirt. Unfortunately, though, while I'm placing the dirt, these little streaks of dirt just aren't very convincing. I need something that makes it look a little bit more natural, although it is looking better. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reset the black mask. I'm going to right click, add black mask. Whenever you click add mask, you replace the mask that you had already put down. And I need to resize my brush. And you can do that up here to a point. You can move the size up some. And now I'm painting rust a little bit more naturally all across the helmet. And it's very fainted. Maybe you think, well, that rust looks okay, but I wish I could see it a little bit better. Okay, you want a more rusty helmet. You can click on the left-hand side here, and we can increase the balance to make change the values a bit. We can increase the contrast. I don't really want that though. I like it the way it is a lot. If we come down to gradient, we'll find that this material is special in that it's hooked up to two separate colors. And we can actually change the colors of this material to make the rust look maybe more orange if that's what you want, or maybe more dark, etc. But to be honest, the rust that we got here already, it is very faint, and I don't like making my stuff look too rusty, so I'm just going to keep it, and I'm just going to kind of keep painting with this large dirt brush. I think that's good enough for now. Now, the next thing that we need to do to make this helmet kind of stand out, it would be great if the cross visor actually kind of stood out, didn't it? So go ahead and close the Steel Rust Surface folder, and go ahead and click the Fill Layer icon right here. And this adds a completely new layer that will consume the helmet in, well, darkness. In order to shed light on this poor helmet's dark soul, you're going to want to add a mask. Go ahead and right click on the fill layer, add black mask, and remember the rust we were painting with earlier? The black mask by default consumes everything, and so we're going to have to use the brush to draw in place and reveal it. So if I want darkness to start showing through, I just start clicking, and there it is. And there are all sorts, I'm going to reset the black mask, all sorts of paint brushes that you can use to get effects you want. Like maybe you want to make something more fantasy looking on your own time. Here's some cracks. Well, that's not quite working out. Here we go. There we go. And I'm just kind of drawing cracks on there. You know, maybe you could make it look like this helmet has been consumed by some lava magic and you're just seeping it out. And if I want to change the color of what I'm painting, I just come over here onto the black plane, and then I right click, diffuse, and I can just up the color. Then boom, there you go. I want it to look more like lava. I'd probably do something a bit more like this. A bit more orange. There we go. I would just start drawing. And so there's all sorts of cool stuff you can do to add wear and tear to your helmet, but I don't need all that. So I'm just going to reset the black mask, and I'm going to reset the diffuse color to, actually I'm going to choose red because this is going to be our crossguard helmet. I'm going to choose a more toned down red color. And now rather than actually painting the red with any sort of brush, I'm actually going to use a more effective option for selecting an entire area, like the crossguard. If I come over here to the left side of my screen, I have something called Polygon Fill. And Polygon Fill allows us to fill polygons, kind of like the Paint Fill tool in Microsoft Paint back in the day. I just click and drag. Boom, it covers everything. Look at that. I can click Paint, you know, to remove the polygons, just kind of admire it. Doesn't look very good. So I'm just going to hit Control Z, Control Z. Thank God that command is universal, am I right? And if I want to paint the cross guards, I can do it kind of like this, but it's going to be a bit difficult to touch everything I want to, especially because if I paint something that's visible, it also will paint stuff behind the invisible polygons on the other side. Like right here, I click and drag, there's that face, but it also got this face over here. So that's not really what I want either. By far the easiest way to do this is if I come up here in the top right and I choose 3D only and I swap to 2D and 3D. And then if I come over here, uh-oh, it looks like something got a little bit messed up. That's right, I forgot to properly UV unwrap the bottom side of the helmet that I created, but that's okay. This is going to happen to you a lot too, probably when you're making stuff, and I'm going to show you how to fix it live. We're just going to go back to Blender, click our helmet. I seem to still have all of these faces selected. I'm going to go to UV editing. Here we go. I'm going to press U, unwrap. I'm going to select and drag this. I'm going to move it over here. I'm going to press the A key to select everything. I'm going to click and drag over this. I'm going to press S to resize it. I'm going to move it right back in here. And yeah, that should work fine. Maybe make it a bit smaller so that it's up to scale. Same scale as everything else. No, maybe a bit bigger. And once again, I'm going to click the helmet, File, Export, Wavefont OBJ, go back to Adobe Painter, Edit, Project Configuration, Select, Create Helmet Tutorial 2, OK. There we go. That looks way better, doesn't it? See, you're going to handle this just like a pro. And now we're going to go back to the polygon mode I was talking about. So go ahead and click polygon mode now that we're in both 2D and 3D view. Just click and drag over the parts of the model that you want to appear red. Then we can go back to 3D only. We can go back to brush mode, and that looks a lot better. But to really get the most bang for our buck with the red, we don't want it to be just this vacant red. We can kind of see some of the bumps, but we don't really see any paint scratches or anything super interesting like that. So go ahead and click the top right portion of this layer, normal, and we're going to try a few different things. Let's see how overlay works. Now overlay makes it look quite a bit darker. It does let some of the detail shine through. Well, I'm not sure that's exactly what I want either. So let's try multiply. Multiply is doing much the same thing. Let's try to increase the color of our red, see if making it more vibrant helps. That looks much better, actually. I'm going to check the specular map really quickly. Okay, so that is kind of a problem. We don't really want the specular map to be its own thing on this. So go ahead and right click and open space. We only want the color from this layer. So go ahead and click specular to disable it, click height, and click normal. And that will make it appear a lot more convincing. Now, I think that this helmet would start to look a lot better if we went ahead and make the islets black. So we're going to add another fill layer. We're going to add another black mask. We're going to click on the fill layer. And actually, we want two things in the fill layer. We both want the diffuse turned on and the specular. So, right click in the open space, diffuse and specular, leave those on. Turn off height and turn off normal. Turn the specular all the way down, because remember, the specular is what emulates the metalness. When you're looking into the deep shadows of a knight who's about to kill you, you don't see anything any reflection in there. In fact, what you see is quite soulless and dark and empty. So specular all the way black and diffuse all the way black. Now if we go back to our 3D 2D view, make sure you're clicking on the mask, polygon fill. We have this little slot here that is dedicated to our eye holes. Click and drag. Boom. Great helmet's looking already a lot better. I'm going to go back to 3D view for a moment. I think that the metal on our helmet is a little bit too white, and at this point I'm going to pull up one of our references from earlier. Now, this helmet back in the day might have been painted, might not, we don't really know. I don't think we want our helmet to look near as worn down as this. Certainly no knight back in the day would have worn a helmet in this condition unless he was just absolutely poor and he had nothing left. So we don't want to emulate that too much. I do kind of wonder sometimes though if this red color is really what we want. I think we can tone down the brightness of the metal. So let's go back to the steel rust surface folder, open the folder up, base metal. Let's just turn the diffuse down some. There we go. That's starting to have a bit more pop to it. Let's go to metal scratches, right click, diffuse, and let's turn that down some. Well, we want contrast between the scratches though and the metal underneath. So let's go back to base metal. And you can just fine tune these two values until you get almost exactly what you want. And the rust, if the rust is kind of hurting the overall color and the character of the model, what you can do to make a layer more transparent is if you come over here, we have a transparency slider. It's at 100, or opacity slider, it seems to say. And we can just dial that down, and we can make the rust not near as present on the armor. Just go ahead and tinker with that until you're happy with it. And dang, the helmet is starting to look like something that exists in the real world with the materials put together now, doesn't it? Now, the other thing, as we're getting to kind of finish up this project, and I do apologize if I'm stumbling over myself a bit. I've taught way more people how to make 3D models than actually texture in this program, so I'm not as used to it. But if you go back to OpenBRF, we can kind of, again, get a guideline from our own great helmet. And here we see in the diffuse, there's just lots of color variety, quite a few dark spots and light spots. And we have that. We have plenty of dark and light spots mixed together, especially on the bottom side there, all over the helmet, so that's pretty good. If we go to the bump map, we notice it's this weird like purple, pink, blue color. And we can actually see what ours looks like in Substance Painter. Just go to Substance Painter, and when you're looking at the view, you can click on Material, and you can go to Normal. And if we had any normal maps activated, we would see a lot more detailing in here. But what we want to do in this case actually is click Normal plus Height plus Mesh. And now we're actually kind of seeing more of that come together. It's kind of interesting to me to see just how tame the normal map is here. I thought for sure it would be a lot more bouncy. It seems to me that most of the 3D detail isn't even coming from the normal map, to my surprise. It's actually coming from, if we come up here, we click Specular. And our Specular is not too far off from their Specular. Their Specular is definitely brighter than ours, but we're making a darker colored helmet, so I'm not too worried about that. The Specular looks pretty great for the most part. One thing we do want to do, though, is you'll notice that their Specular and their diffuse has some dark shading underneath the helmet. I'm just going to go back and find that again. You notice that it has like these pocket shadows that have accumulated. And that's because we can't have the lighting engine do all the work. We actually have to draw some of the shadows ourselves. I mean, we did for the eye slots anyways, so that's not really a surprise. So let's go ahead and take care of that. In order to properly draw shadows, I want to go back to Material. I want to go back to 3D View Only. And I'm going to close this folder, and I'm going to add yet another layer, to layer 3. I'm going to add a black mask. Going to go to our brushes again. And I'm going to choose, should be right here, Dirt 1. In this new layer, I want to activate a few things. I don't want height, I don't want normal, I just want specular, and I want diffuse. And specular we're going to make all the way dark, and diffuse we're also going to make all the way dark. And we're going to kind of paint along the edges of the crossguard, or whatever you call it, on the great helmet. So click and just kind of start painting. It's not going to be perfect, but that's okay. It doesn't need to be. You're also going to get some on the cross itself, but that's okay. Some of that can even be good to have. Just kind of go along the edges. Now our brush is kind of getting out of whack because it just paints to inconsistency. Like you'll see it suddenly jump up and down. We can change that in settings by right-clicking with our brush. Come all the way to the top here. Scroll down. Yeah, just click the option all the way on your left. Then scroll down to, would it be flow? I think it's called scatter. Position, jitter, tangent wrap. Maybe it's flow. No. Stroke opacity, spacing, size, jitter. Low jitter, position jitter. Yeah, position jitter. So I'm gonna reapply a black mask and try to do this again with the position jitter turn pretty much all the way down. I'm just gonna, oh wait, one more thing. you have a mirror tool in Substance Painter just like you do in Blender. If you click right up here on top, it's called symmetry. Anything we paint on the left hand side gets applied onto the right. Go ahead and just you also don't need to come up here to change the size of your brush. If you hold down Shift and what was it again? Yeah, if I hold down Control, then right click and then move my mouse up and down, I can choose how hard basically I'm applying the stamp, if you think of it like a stamp, you know. And if I move left and right while holding Control and the right mouse button, I change the size of it. And so over time, you just learn to do these movements really quickly and make the brush exactly what you want on the fly. You know, it'll take time. If that's not really your thing, don't worry about it. You can kind of come over here and up here and fiddle with them. So, yeah. So yeah, just kind of paint the sides of the cross just like this. Paint the sides, paint the sides. And there we go. And I'm going to do it once more. And that's pretty heavy. Now I'm going to right click and I'm going to come all the way down to the bottom and I'm going to change my grayscale setting from white all the way to black. Now when it's white, we're painting wherever we click, but when it's black, we take away. And so now that I have reversed the grayscale, I can just kind of take away my black options, or my black markings. I'm going to size it up a bit. It's just a little bit too prominent here. I'm going to size it back down a bit. It's going to come from the bottom. Swoop-de-doo. Keep on running. Now that looks good. The black is really overpowering though and really hurts the view of the helmet. So what we're also going to do is we're just going to turn down the opacity of this fill layer. You might remember that we did that earlier with the rust. We're going to do the same thing with this. I'm going to call them they're hard-baked shadows, I believe is the term for them. Well, maybe not hard-baked, hard-painted would be a more correct term. Go over to the opacity and just slide that down. There we go, that's better, about 73. And let's just keep painting the stuff away until it seems more natural, you know, less fake. More like it's just part of the natural light and what's going on. And you may notice, like, even with here, the paint for the shadows is not perfectly applied. It is kind of jagged and interrupted on the edges. I've seen some people do very, very smooth painting, but when you do that, it can look kind of cartoony. So it's a bit of a difficult balance to maintain. So and a lot of substance painting can just come down to this, just fine tuning all these little shadows and extra details that you have at the end. Then I'm just going to tone it down a bit more. And then what I might do actually is sometimes, just tone it down a lot, add even another layer where I do the same thing again so I have two layers to work with. Make sure you only have speck and diffuse, turn that off. Speck goes all the way down. Whoops. Right click, start painting away. And for this stuff, I barely want it to show. And these shadows are going to stay much harder by the time I'm done. Another trick that I'm doing here is when I click somewhere, if I hold shift and then I click somewhere else, it draws a line between the 2 points that I clicked. That'll help you out a lot, so do start getting used to that now. And I can just kind of turn that down even more. And now we want to get rid of some of this shadowing from the cross guards, and the way we do that is we go back to 2D mode, then we go to polygon select mode, polygon fill, and then we start drawing over the cross, but uh-oh, we're filling it in instead of taking it away. Why is that? Well, it's because we need, when we're in polygon mode, we need to change the color from white to black. Now we're removing wherever we click and drag as opposed to applying. And actually during polygon mode, I'm just pressing Control Z to undo all that. It's good to turn off mirror mode because sometimes it does weird things, like you might affect a neighboring area you're trying to paint. It's just better not to use symmetry or mirror mode turned on when you're doing polygon fill. Just make sure that you get everything as good as you can. There we go. That's starting to look pretty nice. I want the red to be a bit more vibrant. I'm gonna tone it up some. And then I'm going to come back to fill layer number 3. I'm going to go to 2D and 3D. I'm actually going to see how it looks if I remove the black shading that we applied. See if we like it better or worse. What do you think? You know what? That shading actually does kind of help it, so let's just kind of roll with it. Let's go select dirt, make sure we're in brush mode, and let's just kind of tame it down. I'm going to right click, I'm going to go to black mode. I'm going to resize this barely. Again, you can come up here or you can use the mouse shortcut I showed you earlier. Hold Control, right click, move left and right. Then I can just start kind of easing this in. Oh yeah, don't forget, every time you reselect, go from polygon mode back to the brush mode, you're going to have to right click, you're going to have to find position jitter, and you're going to have to turn it mostly down. There you go. Oh, and don't forget mirror mode. That's very close to what we want. There we go. That's starting to look pretty good. Now, one of the bad things though is the metal is too shiny on the cross guard, and we can actually fix that really easily. We just go over to our red layer, we right click, we add back a specular map, and we make the specular map completely black. And now it doesn't shine at all, kind of like it's painted. If we want to add just a little bit of shine, what we can do is we can change the layers up here from from diffuse to specular, and then we can change the opacity or the transparency of the specular map. And so what we're doing here, I'm just going to change the mode to specular view for a moment. If we change it to change it down, the original map underneath starts to show through. So let's make it a little bit visible. And we'll go back to material mode, and you know, that really does not look bad. In fact, that looks quite handsome. And now we can start adding some of the more finer details to the rest of the helmet and get away from the cross visor, whatever you call it. I still don't know. I should have looked that up. Anyways, there are lots of bolts on or I mean rivets on this helmet. I actually did learn the correct technical term for that the other day. Bolts are always temporary, rivets are permanent, and this helmet's not meant to be like unscrewed apart. So those are rivets. And we're going to have some lines drawn for the segments. Again, let's just go back to our own reference of a great helmet. We can kind of go around the back. So we're going to need a line going from the tip of our cross guard all the way to the other side. We're also going to need to have some breadths. And we're going to need some fairly shiny rivets up front. And our own historical reference shows us pretty much the same thing. So I'm going to add another layer, and getting a lot of layers right now, and that might get confusing if we want to edit stuff later. So why don't we name some of these layers? You can rename a layer by right-clicking it, backspace. I'm going to call this one breaths because we're going to make like the breathing holes on the helmet. Right-click, add a black mask. Same thing again. I want diffuse and I want specular because the breathing holes are not going to reflect light, so we'll make those all the way dark, and they're also going to be dark just like, you know, the eye sockets. But a bonus thing about the breaths is they need to have some sort of indentation. So if we click height and we get a new slider bar down here, let's turn that down a little bit, like to 0.21, something like that. Turn on. Go to the mirror, turn on mirror mode, or click on the mask, turn on mirror mode, find your brushes, basic hard. Basic hard is a very basic brush, and wherever we click, you know, we make basically the paint.net default brush, if you will. Now, I could turn the size down and start drawing breathing holes, kind of like this. And it mirrors the other side. But there's a better way to do it. We want to actually make the brush a little bit softer so that the hole that's punched through the helmet seems a little bit more natural. And for that, I would recommend you hold down the Control key and move down slightly. We create kind of like a ring inside of the ring. And now when we punch it in, the hole actually seems to have depth. We just did it a bit too far. So again, hold Control, right click, move up and down until you get it right about here. And we want to make sure our holes are going to be close to the same side as those holes. Let's take a look at our historical reference. Those holes are actually quite tiny. Kind of surprising. I like bigger holes on my helmets personally. I just think they look cooler. You can do whatever suits you. I've seen historical references for both. And I'm just gonna see how many here. They got 3, 3, 4, 3. It's a bit hard to make out here, but it looks like 4, 4, 4 all the way across. Just do something kind of like this. Click, 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 click. Try to space them out somewhat evenly. There you go. Like from the front side, the helmet looks almost complete. Let's come down. Let's change our layer from specular to diffuse. And let's just mark this, you know, as our cross. Let's mark this one as our eyes. Mark this as cross shadows. Cross shadows folder. You can delete this top layer, it doesn't help us out at all. And now let's go ahead and try to add some bolts onto the front of our helmet. To add the bolts, we just add a new layer, black mask again, right click, diffuse, height, normal. We don't ever really need the normal unless we're using very specific materials, by the way. Now, bolts are meant to kind of shine. They're meant to be polished and just kind of draw your attention a little bit. The Byzantines, when they made armor, apparently they used more bolts than was necessary. I'm sorry, I mean rivets, just because it looked cool. They had literally fake rivets, as a means of decoration on their armor. Kind of like we like to overdo buttons on some of our shirts these days if we want to show off how fancy we are. But anyways, we're going to turn the specular a decent way up. We're going to make the diffuse also a little bit higher than we might normally. And the height, we're just going to turn that to 0.24, I think should be good. Right click, make sure your mirror mode is active. Look at our great helmet reference from Warband. Look at our historical reference. And I think 3 bolts across the top would look pretty nice for this helmet. So hold down Control, right click, move to the left, click. Actually, we're going to do 4. Click, click, and click. We're going to do the bottom side. Click, 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 and click. Would you look at that? And of course, we're going to need some bolts on the top and the bottom. In the historical version, we only have 1 at the center. I think it would be fine if we did 2 though, so we'll just put some here. And that is looking mighty fine. Also, the top side is meant to have bolts, so let's go ahead and go around the top, add some. Let's come up here. We're going to go back to mirror mode. See how far apart are those spaced. 1.5 inches maybe. So click, click, click. I'm holding shift and holding down the middle mouse button to move my camera, just like Blender. All the way around. And sometimes it can be hard to space this perfectly. So, and in order to get rid of this, because I need to erase some of these and remake them, I just right click, go all the way to the bottom, grayscale black, and I just start drawing over the ones I want to replace. Very good. Go back all the way to white. Boom. Just want to, spacing did get a little bit odd there. Awesome. And lastly, we're going to try to finish this up in a bit of a hurry. You've actually learned all the basic stuff that you need to make most helmets as far as texturing goes for Mountain Blade Warband. Something else you might do is add another layer. I'm going to call it Shine, Black Mask, Diffuse, turn the specular up, turn the diffuse up. On this, make our surface that we're clicking a bit bigger. Kind of go along the edge down here. Then shaboom. Now I'm just kind of erasing some of it. You don't have to be as fluid as me. I'm just trying to show you in a hurry. And I'm going to go back to polygon mode, and I'm going to actually deselect that area on the chin that I don't want to be selecting. Looks like we missed some faces down here, but that's okay. I'll show you how to fix that in a moment. Go back to our shine. Let's make the opacity a lot lower. There we go. Let's go to the specular and let's make that opacity a lot lower. Let's go back to the diffuse, lower that some more. There we go, that's pretty okay. I mean, you can, again, you can just spend hours upon hours perfecting how your objects look in a 3D space, and it can be kind of addicting. Now we're going to add some indentions for the back of the helmet. That. Let's come here, add another layer, indentions, black mask, no more normal, turn down the height, turn down the diffuse and the specular. Actually, the diffuse we're going to go up a bit because we don't want it to be too dark. I'm going to this down. Want to make sure I'm doing this as good as I can. All right, this part could be a little tricky. But if we come here to where we see our mirrored halfway point and the edge of our eyepiece, we should be able to just click here, hold shift, and then come to the middle point. Okay, that worked pretty well, but there's still a bit of an angle, so I'm just going to click here and kind of correct that. Go all the way down, go to black, kind of erase that, erase that. Okay, there we go. And then we'll go ahead and add another one to the back side. Here we're just going to try to line up as good as we can. Come to the top. Yeah, I don't really want to double paint this. I'm just going to disable that. Go to the top, go all the way to the bottom. Click, boom. And I think our line was a bit too thick there. So yeah, I'm just going to kind of go up. Show me where the line is again. Okay, very good. There we go. Then we'll go back to our, what do we call these? The bolts. Let's name those the rivets, actually. All the way white. You look at our Warband reference. Larger bolts go on the bottom half. Gonna go like boom. Oh, didn't have mirror mode on. Shrink the bolt size down a bit. Into the top. Want to get that spacing perfect. There we go. And you have pretty good looking great helmet. There's even more that you can do, actually. I don't know if it's super necessary. I'm just going to look in the diffuse for a moment. The indentions, I feel like this could be, let's make this slightly opacity. There we go. Let's turn the diffuse down even more. There we go. Now, there are tons of other details, like in this great helmet, there are shiny rings kind of around like the breaths. You can see it here barely. And I haven't found a really good way to do that. I imagine there's a stupid easy way to do it, but if you want to do that, you can just add another fill layer, black mask, only specular and diffuse, specular for shininess, make that fairly white, and then diffuse, make that kind of gray. And then this is where the order of layers is important, because if I click this now, I will, let's say if I started out on the top, I would cover up the breaths, so I need to move this underneath the breaths in layers. And maybe if you're having trouble in this tutorial, like some of your layers aren't showing up right, it's because you didn't put the layers down in order. Some need to go at the top, some need to go more towards the bottom. But yeah, this needs to go under breaths because that's where we're painting. We're trying to paint underneath the breaths. So yeah, that's what I'm gonna do. I'm just gonna make my diffuse all the way white so I can see it. I'm actually gonna paint in diffuse mode because it's a bit easier to make sure I'm centering everything perfectly. Turn my mirror on. Boom, 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 boom. Just like that. You may have noticed this icon over here. That's autosave for Blender. What it will do is, Substance Painter. Oh man, messing up so many words today. But what that will do is it'll automatically save your file, and it lets you know ahead of time so you can stop it if you don't want to like maybe overwrite the previous version. Sometimes these can be a bit hard to center. Yeah, there you go. And let's see how it looks in material. Okay, a little bit too bright. That's okay. I wanted it fairly bright though. I'll just turn the diffuse up. That's kind of reasonable, right? Kind of reasonable. A bit more, maybe make it more see-through. A bit brighter again to counteract the see-through because you still want the texture underneath to kind of go through, you know? And then for the specular, go look at that. The specular is a bit much here. Just want to tone it down a bit, I guess. Look at that. The only weird thing is that just kind of seems to me like the bolts aren't indentions anymore, and that's just really awkward. Oh, it's because the height was positive. We want it to be negative. So go ahead and just add a minus. There we go. That's the way it's supposed to look. Now I want my diffuse layer, the color, be a bit more see-through. Gonna make the specular a bit more see well. That is looking pretty fine. And the last thing that we kind of want to do before this helmet is complete is add shadows to the other bolts. Breath, edge, shine. That's what I'm going to name that. So find, where did we put our shininess stuff? Which one? Why can't I find it? Am I dumb? Rivets. It should be called rivets, right? Oh wow, I had it selected. Oh boy. So yeah, I'm just gonna add diffuse, specular. We'll turn the specular down. And this is gonna be kind of like the breast that we did earlier, only we're just gonna add some shadows underneath our rivets. I'm gonna go to diffuse mode so I can see more easily. Boom, 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 boom. I'm going to expand this a bit. I just noticed that our indentation layer that we made earlier does not have a specular map. There should be some darkness involved, shouldn't there? Have to do for now, I guess. Oh, that's because of the shine layer. That's covering that up. That's okay. We can move the shine layer down below our new one. Right, let's go back up to their bolts. All right, and that looks fantastic. I'm actually gonna tone down a little bit on here because you want it present but not too overpowering. And then we're gonna go back to the indentions. Oh wait, maybe I didn't have that turned on earlier, and that's why I didn't see it. Yeah, they're kind of there. I think the specular should be a bit darker though. All right. Now, lastly, we're going to add some shadowing on the top side here. To do that, all we need to do is go to the cross shadows. We're actually going to add our own layer. Top shadows, same drill again. Black mask, diffuse and specular all the way down, black. Find the dirt. Where is it? And then remember to find the position jitter and put it all the way down. There we go. Then we'll just start drawing. And sometimes the shininess makes it hard to see what you're drawing, so you can always go from material mode to diffuse mode. And I did not have mirror mode turned on. Okay, let's go all the way. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of go halfway on our grayscale and just kind of paint between it. I'm just going to add a duplicate layer and kind of use the same trick that we did earlier. A quick sloppy name. And pretty much we just repeat what I already taught you. Just checking out everything here, making sure it's pretty good. As a general rule, as well in Warband, if it looks good when you only see the diffuse map, it should look pretty good in Warband. Yeah, with that, I think we're about ready to go for the next step. But yeah, saving in this program is just the same as it is in all the others you use. We go to File, we go to Save or Save As, and then you choose the name. In my case, Tutorial Great Helmet, which I already have right here, and I'm going to save and overwrite it. And there you go. That should be pretty good. Okay, next. Wait, one more thing. I want to forget this. Go back to Polygon Fill, 2D. Oops. Actually, for a moment, let's just see how it looks if turn the whole layer off. Not bad. Kind of like our reference. You could also make it different colors depending on what, I guess, historical monastic knighthood order you want to be part of. Make it green for the Knights of Lazarus. I don't know if they existed long enough to get this type of great helmet, though. But yeah, your very first great helmet should be complete now. Go ahead and pan the camera around and admire it. And that's really all there is to it. In the next video, I'm going to show you how to port this into the Mount & Blade Warband engine. If you need help or are stuck on anything, go ahead and let me know in the comments. I'll do my best to get back to you, or maybe some other helpful stranger will. And that's all for now. I'll see you in the next video.